The first time I played Once Human, I bounced off it pretty hard. It was during one of the betas and I loaded it up, played through the tutorial and thought, okay, it's kind of a cool third-person shooter, kind of Control vibes, and that was fun. But then it kicked me out into an open area and was like, here's an axe, go hit a tree a bunch of times to gather some wood, go hit this rock a bunch of times to gather some gravel, and then craft some arrows and go fight this giant monster that looked quite exciting, but you just had to hit it like 6 times with arrows and then it died. It really wasn't much fun at all, and I just noped out of the game. I was like, I've played a bunch of survival games that are just like this. It seemed very derivative. I thought the area you were in was quite ugly. It just didn't seem like my type of game at all. So I just uninstalled it. Then, since the game came out, I've had a few people come to my chat and say, hey, have you tried this game yet? It's really good. And I was like, no, I tried it, didn't like it, wasn't for me. But then I saw Tomographic released a video about it, and he said that he was addicted to the game. And I usually trust Tomographic's opinion on things. So I watched his video, and within about 5 minutes, I was sold. It just looked like the stuff he was doing and the world he was exploring was really cool. So I set it to download, and I am so glad I did. In the last 2 days, I've ended up playing this game for about 13 hours, and to be honest, even while I'm editing this video now, I just want to play more of it. It's kind of hard to describe exactly what Once Human is. Somebody on stream asked me what this game was about earlier, and I was like, I don't really know. It's like a third-person looter shooter MMO where you also build your own base. There's a pretty involved story, so it's got that kind of MMORPG type thing. You also have skills and things like that you can level up and make decisions about how you're going to build your character. There's a bunch of crafting. There's also these little beastie things that you kind of go around and collect, and you can use them in combat, almost a bit like Power World, and other ones will help you gather resources at your base, again, a bit like Power World. It's got a bit of a bunch of other genres. Sometimes when people tune into my streams, they're like, oh, this game looks like Days Gone. Then other times it looks a bit more like Rust, or it looks like Control. It's a weird sort of mishmash of lots of different ideas that I have seen in games before, but put together in a way that's just so much fun, and something entirely new, really. So the basic gameplay loop, I guess, in Once Human is that you build up a base, and it could be like a house, or you could build up more like a military base if you want to, and then you can explore the world around your base for resources to craft more things, or you could take on missions. There's a bunch of NPCs and they will give you missions, which will normally involve you going to an area and then fighting some sort of supernatural monsters there. You've got a bunch of different weapons that you can use to fight them, and one thing I love about this game is how powerful all of the weapons feel. Like, even the very starting melee weapon feels incredible to use. And some of the enemies are quite dangerous, and some of them can come at you in quite large numbers, but you always feel pretty powerful, at least up to where I am now. Like I said, I've played for about 15 hours or so now, and I still feel insanely powerful in the game. While you're completing the missions, you'll get new loot, you'll get new kind of crafting blueprints so you can make more weapons and gear. You'll sometimes pick up weapons or armor and things like that. You'll gain experience, and you'll get these special points that you can use to unlock a massive crafting tree. So, you can choose whether you want to focus on things that will let you build up your base a little bit more, or whether you want to be able to design better weapons and things like that. It's kind of up to you which direction you go, but the game is super generous with all of these points, so it feels like you can take basically everything. And while you're doing these missions, there's also a huge open world, so there'll be a bunch of different like towns and areas, military bases, where almost like a Ubisoft game, you can go explore them, get some decent loot, and have kind of a checklist of things to do, like trying to find this device that you have to interact with, trying to find hidden chests, maybe killing certain enemies, things like that. And you'll keep on finding little side quests. There is a main story, but then there's also a bunch of kind of NPCs that are tied to one particular area. So you might just come across a tiny little storyline that you can follow. In that way, it feels a bit like The Secret World, which was an MMO that I feel was massively underappreciated. Then once you've got a little bit more powerful, then you can complete the main story missions and move on to the next region, where you can do all of that stuff again, but with more difficult enemies, more types of resources for you to collect, so then you can craft more exciting things. And there's also things like massive bosses that you can take on, where you can choose the difficulty before you go in and fight them. And then if you do it on a harder difficulty, obviously you get better rewards. If you want to do it on a lower difficulty, you can still fight the boss and enjoy the fight, but with lesser rewards. So there's kind of replayability in that. And we haven't even talked about the deviations, which are like these weird little magical creatures that exist in the world that sometimes you'll have to defeat them to capture them, or you'll get them as a result of doing a quest. Sometimes you'll just find them out in the world, and they might do things like letting you teleport a bit when you're using melee weapons when you're fighting, or maybe they'll fight on your behalf, or maybe they'll gather ore around your base, or even just tidy your base up and find objects that other people have left behind. They all seem super creative and super weird. I don't think I've ever seen anything quite like those in a game like this. Oh, and you can get a motorbike in the game. The game just gives you one super early on, and I think later you can get like trucks and lorries and things like that. You can get bigger vehicles that you can add on to and use to drive around the world. Because did I mention, this is kind of set in the present day. So whereas a lot of these survival games are kind of set in medieval time periods to explain why you're going around chopping down trees and mining and stuff like that, this one has a bunch of machine guns and rocket launchers and grenades and things like that. It's just a slightly post-apocalyptic world, that kind of vibe. But it means that you have a lot of modern day weapons, modern day armor. It's a lot of fun, and I think that gives it a kind of fresh look for a survival game. And then on top of all of those things that I've already been talking about, it's basically an MMO. You can do all of these things that I've been talking about with your friends. You will see other people out in the world. It has persistent servers, so when you're driving about, you'll see other people's bases, other people's houses. You can team up with people if you want. You can interact with them. You can make guilds and clans and things. Those big boss fights, they recommend you do them in a group. So obviously, if there's more of you, you can take on harder difficulties and get better rewards. And all of the co-op stuff has been really well thought out. So when you're going around looting stuff, you get your own personal loot. You don't have to be squabbling over who killed what and who gets to grab the loot first. You'll all get your own loot, which is absolutely awesome. And that sense kind of pervades through the entire game, that this is another one of these games that seems to be designed by people who really understand the genre. I said this about Delta Force when I played in a technical test, that yes, it's another extraction shooter, but it seems to be made by people that really understand the problems with other extraction shooters, and Delta Force avoided a load of them. The people who are making Once Human seem to understand the problems with other survival games. Yes, you have to eat and drink to stay alive, but the effects of not eating and drinking for quite a long time aren't really that severe, and it's super easy to find something to eat or drink. But if you find like really good quality food, or you can craft it, or you manage to find decent drinks, then they're going to give you noticeable buffs. So it's not like having to eat and drink is ever a problem. It's not something that's going to cause you many issues, but it is something that you can play with if you want to make your character more powerful. Similarly, there are weight limits to how much you can carry, but they're unbelievably generous. You could easily be looting for a couple of hours and not have any trouble with it. And then when you want to go back to your base, just teleport there. That's absolutely fine. Or, even better, in a stroke of absolute genius, you can teleport your base to you. Every 10 minutes, with no cost or anything like that, you can just relocate your base. So after you've been fighting in one region for ages and doing quests and farming resources, and then you move on to the next part of the story, you move on to the next region, you can just swap your base and put it somewhere that's more convenient. The game isn't punishing you for having made a decision earlier on. It's just saying, hey, it would probably be better if you had your base here now. Just press B, then Z, and now you can just drop your base wherever you want it. Stuff like that seems revolutionary to me for a game like this. It's just a survival game without any of the faff. Also, when you're mining resources, you're using the first axe you get to chop a tree down or to mine some rocks. You get tons of resources super quickly. I built this incredible house that took me absolutely ages, hit the building limit that my character has at the moment of 300 pieces, and I barely spent any time mining at all, because I think whoever made this game realized that spending ages hitting trees over and over again isn't that much fun. It's much better if you can get that bit out of the way quickly and then get focused on the building. For those of you who maybe are put off by survival games that have PvP, or those of you that absolutely love PvP in survival games, it's worth noting that there are PvE and PvP servers. I haven't engaged in any PvP at all yet. I'm on a PvE server, and from what I've heard, the PvP is super limited whichever server you're on. So basically there's some regions, there's some activities you can do, and if you want, you can flag yourself for PvP, even if you're on a PvE server. When you kill enemies, they just drop a little bit of the loot that they're carrying. Similarly, when you die on a PvE server, you drop some of the items you're carrying, apparently. I haven't really died much yet, so I haven't engaged with that. But the only real difference with the PvP servers, as far as I can tell, is that you are flagged by default for PvP when you go into those areas. So people can't come raid your base and steal all your stuff. People can't just attack you when you're out on the road. It's only in specific areas. And on the PvE servers, you choose whether you're going to fight other players or not. And on the PvP servers, you're always going to be at risk of getting attacked in those areas. In terms of negatives for the game, so far I haven't really come across any. The game is free to play. I haven't really mentioned that yet, I don't think, but this game is completely free to play. You don't need to pay anything up front. There's no subscription or anything like that, and it seems to have more content than a lot of games that are paid or have subscriptions. So far, I haven't felt pushed to spend any money on microtransactions. There's a bunch of cosmetics and stuff that you can buy, as you would expect. I think there's also a few other services that you can pay for, like changing your name, changing your character's appearance if you want to, and then I'm guessing there's probably some things that like speed stuff up. Like I said, I haven't felt a need to do any of that kind of stuff yet. I haven't even felt like the game has really been directing me towards spending any money at this point, which is pretty solid. But some of you might be put off by the fact that yes, it is free to play. Yes, there are microtransactions available. There's a battle pass and stuff like that. It all seems very extra, but you know, if that bothers you, that is a part of this game. Also, there are server wipes in this game. Now, this is a little bit weird. I only just got told about this today while I was streaming, but apparently every 6 weeks or so, they're going to start like a new season in the game, or the next one is in 6 weeks. I'm not sure if it's always going to be 6 weeks apart. And when a new season starts with new storylines and things like that, it's going to reset all of your gear, all of your loot, all of the things that you've been gathering. Now, it won't reset everything. You'll get to keep all of your blueprints, all of your knowledge of how to make things, all of the kind of furniture and stuff like that that you already know how to make. That's going to stay. All of your story progression is going to stay, so you're not going to have to do the same quests over and over again. But you are going to have to start from scratch in terms of building up your weapons and your armor. I'm not really sure why they're doing that. Maybe it's a way of kind of making sure you don't get too attached to things. I'm not sure how it's going to work with microtransactions. Like, if you've already paid for some items that are maybe cosmetic, do you get them again in the next season? I've got absolutely no idea. But there is some kind of wipe, so you shouldn't get too attached to your gear or anything like that. And my final negative about this game isn't really a big deal to me, but if you're really into the story, there's a lot of inconsistency right now in terms of how much of it is voice acted, the quality of that voice acting. Your character doesn't speak, and it's really weird. Like, you don't even get any text on screen showing you what your character said, but everything is presented as if your character's saying something. You just weirdly don't know what it is. You can kind of pick it up from context cues of what the other side says, but it does seem really jarring, and it makes a lot of the story beats quite hard to follow. There's a lot of kind of supernatural nonsense and made-up words and lots of made-up concepts, and it feels quite overwhelming at first that you're just kind of dropped into the deep end, and you're being given all of these different currencies, all of these different kinds of resources. There's all of this stuff going on in the world, and everyone seems to expect you to know what they're talking about. I felt completely lost. So far, I've just been super enjoying all of the gameplay. I've been enjoying building up my base and going and fighting enemies and completing quests and all of that kind of thing. I haven't really paid any attention to the story at all, and I don't really know what's going on. Maybe over time that side will grow on me and I'll get a bit more interested in it, but for now, I feel like I can do without it. But if you're interested in playing Once Human, it's only available on PC right now. You can just go onto Steam and download it. Like I said, it's free to play. It's super good fun. I've got a couple of streams up where you can see all the stuff that we've been getting up to in game. Of course, come check out my streams over on Twitch. There's Twitch drops and everything like that. So twitch.tv/geekypastimes. Follow me there and you can watch that. But I heartily recommend this game. As someone that's been super fed up with Call of Duty at the moment, it's been really nice to have other games to play. And I think this is going to tide me over at least until the Delta Force Alpha starts at the beginning of August. And then obviously we have Black Ops 6, you know, the tests for that starting at the end of August. I think this game's going to keep me going till then at least, so make sure you check out the streams if you want to see more. Thanks so much for watching, and goodbye.